In this podcast series, which is one of 6 that we're doing in terms of engaging with the faculty of party wall surveyors, we're approaching that engagement with the faculty from so many different angles. And one of the key activities that the faculty gets involved in is the forums and training courses. I'm delighted to welcome today fellow director of the Faculty of Party Wall Surveyors, Daniel Ross, who is a director of the South London Party Wall Surveyors Company. He's also, as I said, a fellow director of forums, and one of his many things that he's been doing over the years for the faculty is director of forums. And this is his main focus at the moment, but you will have seen, or you will see, in another podcast episode of the series, he's also been involved in interviews in the past. So great deal of wealth and experience of the whole process. But Daniel, as I said, you've been involved in both training and forums. Would you start off by describing the training courses which are available to the faculty?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So there's a number of training courses you can attend with the Faculty of Party Wall Surveyors. The main one, I suppose, being the 2-day seminar, which goes through all elements of the Act. Applicants really should have a good understanding of building pathology and construction knowledge to attend this course. And if they do, they attend their course, they can go through the Act and recognise the different areas of the Act to become a practicing party wall surveyor. We go through everything from sort of Section 1 all the way through the Act. In a lot of detail. So, it is a 2-day course, but there's an awful lot to take in that 2-day course because there's a lot of innuendos within the Act in which we try and clear up for them.
I know it's confession time to our viewers and listeners. I regularly do these 2-day courses with Daniel. And I think we try and put we're acknowledging there's a diversity of people that attend, diversity in terms of education and experience and indeed professions, don't we? And I think it's safe to say that the course we present over the 2 days is structured in a way that we repeat a lot of the information. So if it's not absorbed by a new practitioner quite early, that we will revisit that topic, won't we, as we go through it?
Yeah,
different emphasis.
A lot of sections can overlap. So sometimes whilst we're talking about a certain element of the Act, we can plant seeds and then sort of touch upon it again later on and sort of, almost that eureka moment for applicants to sort of remember a previous part and where the part that we're talking about sort of comes into play.
And do you encourage participation in the most direct way in this 2-day course? Are they permitted to interrupt, or is it a case of wait for the questions at the end? How's it presented?
No, it's really nice to interact. I mean, sometimes you get sort of more chattier groups than others, and again, I think that can depend on the experience levels that we have within that particular group. But always want to encourage interaction between, it's almost like the lecturer and the applicants themselves, and also to interact with each other. It's always, that's why face to face, when doing it face to face on the 2-day seminar is so good, because people can learn from each other as well as the speakers. This
interaction, it's you've already touched upon it. Some will ask more questions than others. It's usually those with experience, but we do try and encourage those with from different backgrounds in terms of professionally and so forth to interact as well. And I know you and I use that phrase, there's no such thing as a silly question, is there?
No, that's right. Because if someone does ask the question, you can almost guarantee there's not someone else in the room that doesn't know the answer either. So that's right. It's always good to ask and make sure that you're absolutely sure. Mm-hmm.
And is it fair to say that the course tends to, as we move through the subjects, tends to accelerate in terms of intensity and quantity? And if so, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, no, I think it does. But we touch upon things. We touch upon maybe the more complicated parts, or where there's a little bit more to it throughout, even on the less complicated sections as well of the Act. So again, it will be mentioned about planting seeds, just so that people then recognise or understand to a certain degree a little bit about the area that we're approaching.
And is there an introduction to the history of the Act at all in this course?
Yes, the first thing we start with is the history of the Act and where it came from, and the first party walls, and how the legislation came into play in the first place.
And which is all very good as far as our listeners and viewers are concerned, because in another episode to this series, we have Alex Frame going into detail and describing about the books that he's produced on the history of the Act and how it came about. So I think it's typical of the courses, isn't it, Daniel, that there is always this overlap of different sources that helps people along the way. And not least, they're presented as part of the course. They have with them, as part of the course, this book that Alex wrote, which is Misunderstandings and Guidance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we promote the other books whilst we're there, because the more information that you have at hand, particularly in and around the party walls, the better knowledge you have, and hopefully the better party wall surveyor you'll become.
Do you encourage a lot of note taking during the process, or are you concerned that while they're writing they're not listening? How do you deal with that?
Copious note taking. There's a lot of information that we provide over the 2 days. There's a lot of information in the Act. So yes, whilst we sort of do drawings on the boards and things like that to enable perhaps people with lesser construction experience to understand what we're talking about, it's really important that lots of notes are taken. But we do the drawings so that maybe they can do the sketches themselves, so that they remember the particular situations and notifiable works that we're actually referring to.
And again, referring back to another episode in this 6-part series, Alex Frame mentioned the exercise that they do at the end of the 2-day. But Alex only had a limited amount of time to talk about that. Perhaps you can give us an idea. What is the purpose of this exercise? Is it to catch them out, or is it to encourage interaction? It's
to try and give them almost some live experience of writing an award. A lot of applicants, it might be the first thing they've done, the first award they've written, the first notices that they've drafted. And so it gives them good experience, and also to learn of someone who's sitting next to them as well, to work it out together, to put into practice what they've taken in over the previous day and 3 quarters.
Would you describe to our viewers and listeners what you and I are doing when we're setting this course? We put our feet up after 2 days of talking. What do we actually get up to during that exercise?
Well, we're always walking around and helping and assisting, and answering the questions as well, helping them understand the drawings and the different sections of the Act to which the drawings relate, and the wording as well. Sometimes the wording when someone's quite green to the Party Wall Act can be a little bit overwhelming in how things are worded. After all, most of the wording was taken from the 1939 Amendment London Building Act, so it's quite dated. So it just helps them understand everything and what everything means and in what order things go.
And just to confirm that Daniel is forever sort of flitting across so many different disciplines within the faculty, you will see in another episode to this podcast series that he talked about the third surveyor course in brief. You were just outlining it, weren't you, Daniel? What does you mentioned it's a day in length. What do we tend to cover in that third surveyor course?
Well, it's more complicated issues. A lot of it's case law and why decisions have been made, and why it's set a precedent. And in actual fact, some of the best determinations are only actually persuasive law at county court level, because they don't need to be appealed. We go through them and help the applicants understand as to why these decisions have been made, and refer it back to the Act.
And you did mention in that other episode briefly again, in the time that was permitted, that the art of actually writing a third surveyor's award, and appreciating that what third surveyors are being asked to decide in this quasi-judicial role, almost like a judge. It's difficult to actually pinpoint a typical, if there's such a thing, a typical third surveyor's award. But would you say that award is just a starting point, isn't it, really, to enable someone to start thinking like a third surveyor?
The third surveyor course is a 1-day course for applicants that have got a good level of experience within the industry already and are practicing party wall surveyors. You need to be a member of the faculty for at least 1 year to attend that course. And after completing that course, you can, of course, apply for fellow status, which would enable you to go on the third surveyor list of the Faculty of Party Wall Surveyors. So essentially, it's for more experienced surveyors. It's often the case that when you select a third surveyor, they're generally more, not always, but generally more experienced than the 2 surveyors under statute. And so when we're writing a third surveyor, again, when you go in to do the interview, you would have submitted a third surveyor award. And we mentioned earlier, didn't we, that it's very important to make sure you stick to the question, you stick to the determination, you stick to what the surveyors or the parties are actually asking you to determine, rather than going off and answering things that perhaps aren't in dispute.
I suppose this leads nicely to your latest passion and activity with the faculty, which is forums, and recognising that the faculty is born out of the need for education, and we continue to educate, don't we, as a institution, through newsletters, e-bulletins. But there's no doubt about it, the forums are the key thing, aren't they? And perhaps you describe to the viewers and listeners a little bit about the nature of the forums. Are they live or online? And the content of them?
Yes, they historically always were live. And then obviously the world changed when COVID hit and everything went online. It worked really well. And consequently, there wasn't so much of a thirst for face-to-face forums. Not least that the venues were very expensive post-COVID. So we do it online now. There's a vast array of forums for beginners, the more basic stuff to hit all our members' abilities. We do case law updates, of course. An act of law is the Party Wall Act, and the goalposts are often changing, so it's important to make sure that we've got our finger on the pulse. We also have opinions on case law as well, held by lawyers and retired judges, and we did one last year, didn't we, with an active judge. So it's always good to get opinions of these people who are dealing with these cases on a day-to-day basis. Often the board members, the panel, produce forums on various topical subjects, whether it's security for expenses or any other forum representatives over the country. So no, it's nice to have a good blend of people to turn to and good opinions. And whilst one set of surveyors or one sort of area of surveyors might be concerned about a certain area of the Act or want a refresher on a certain area, but be another part of another area or another set of surveyors that want to talk about something else. So it's always good to get an insight as to what everyone wants to have a chat about, or what they're arguing over, or whether it's just a refresher on the types of clauses we're putting in the awards. Essentially, it's almost like a CPD. You need to obtain 10 hours of CPD each year, 5 hours of which need to be faculty forums. So it's important to make sure that we provide members of the faculty Party Wall Surveyors with a good opportunity to obtain those hours.
And it's a good point you make there in terms of engagement, isn't it? Because we've spoken about in this episode, and also another episode, about engaging with more people by making the forums more accessible. And certainly the e-forum, the online forum, is one way, but also there's always been this concern, hasn't there, that the profession as a whole is very London-centric. As Alex has told us, how the Act evolved out of the Rebuilding Act and indeed before, but it's always been London, hasn't it? And since 1996, the Act has gone countrywide, England and Wales. And another thing, some areas, particularly rural areas, are not well represented for obvious reasons. The demographics are such that they can't get the numbers in terms of speakers and indeed participants. So that's been another benefit, hasn't it, by going online. We got there through default, through the COVID situation. And another good point you mentioned there, that different scenarios exist in different geographical areas of the country, don't they? We're talking about different subsoils, aren't we? And to contemplate with excavations. So, because I know you're responsible for the national forums, aren't you? And that you used to have national forum heads. Is that still a system that you're operating?
There are still some forum heads throughout the country that are still happy to present. But I think a lot of them preferred the face-to-face, and where there hasn't been a call for it, we tend to sort of just do it through head office now, which isn't a disadvantage to our members. In actual fact, again, as you mentioned just now, because people are in such a wide geographical area, across England and Wales, they don't really have to leave their leave their office to attend a forum and to obtain the knowledge or the updates or the conversations, I mean, that we're often having. I mean, I know we're writing guidance notes at the moment as well, which we're providing and presenting on forums by us and the panel, just to help our members understand the Act as best as they possibly can and work to the letter of the Act. And it's all about the interpretation of it. And it can be interpreted in so many different ways. Sometimes it's just nice to bounce things off people. And if we're always providing the bouncing by means of forums, then I think we're doing a good job.
Yeah, that's well put. And on that theme of engagement, during the forums, I mean, you and I are great fans of the live events, but we have to accept that things have moved on and that the forum is here to stay, and for many good reasons. But during the what we miss is the questions coming out of the audience, and it makes us think. We're always in danger of being complacent, us old codgers. Where it's I've always done it this way, so it must be right. And it's when you get these questions, you begin to question, well, why have I been doing that this way? And with the live events, how do they interact with the speaker? Are they encouraged to interrupt, or there's the chat box facility? Even a Luddite like I know, there's a chat box facility, isn't there? But how do you find that the interaction, as people are getting more and more used to this e-presentation, how does it work?
Well, I literally just took the words out of my mouth. I think when we first started doing them on Zoom, people were a bit apprehensive about speaking out or unmuting themselves and having a conversation, with the screen with everyone sort of watching in. But I think as people have got used to it, and not just on faculty forums, but, country worldwide, with webinars. I mean, how many meetings does one have now on Zoom or Microsoft Teams? It's everywhere, isn't it? So I think people have become far more familiar with almost speaking against the screen to someone else. So it's certainly improving as well. And as you say, there is a chat box, and sometimes different speakers would prefer questions at the end, and some like that sort of introduction or to introduce people, throughout the forum and bounce questions off them straight away, whilst or strike while the iron's hot sometimes. That's what they like to do. But you're right. I mean, it is a shame that we're not doing the face-to-face forums anymore, but unfortunately there just wasn't a call for it. And to try and get that camaraderie back online has been a bit of a trial, but I think we're slowly getting there now, and I think where people are becoming far more interactive with the screen and more comfortable with it, it's certainly coming back. And at the end of the day, what the benefit of the forum is to provide the members with updated and CPD and talking about topical events at the moment, whether that is a bit of case law, whether it is just a refresher or anything else. It's just a good platform to use, particularly in the modern day.
I know we did, perhaps you could remind me why we moved away from it. There was suggestions about hybrid versions, wasn't there, where you'd have a audience as well as an e-audience as well, but you're better versed than I am on that. I think we considered it, didn't we? And there was a couple of experiments, but
I think so. I think what it was, particularly with lawyers or recognised third surveyors. I mean, whilst these hybrid versions can be recorded or maybe kept on files for years and years to come, I mean, opinion often changes as well, and we need to be open to that. Whilst one surveyor can have opinion 1 year, in 5 years' time it might have changed, or not least there's been a bit of been a determination in court which needs to be taken on board. So I think the hybrid version was a good idea, but not something we're doing at the moment.
And another question, it may be difficult to answer at the moment, but we are often asked as to, are we recording these e-forums, and if not, why not at this stage?
Some of them are recorded, but I think more for training purposes from our perspective. It's certainly something that we're considering, because we've spoken about it in a previous podcast, where people can't quite attend the forums at certain times, which again we're looking into providing these forums at different times, at lunchtime, and in the event that people are on the school run or parents are on the school run, and doing them at sort of 4 o'clock on or in the middle of the week can be quite tricky for people to make. So A variety of times is a good way of assist, but I mean, it could be a good idea that if they are recorded and then sent out to applicants to view at a different time, it's certainly on the cards.
Now we've talked about the main courses that the faculty runs, which is the 2-day course and the third surveyor course, but you are actually involved in other courses as well, and you mentioned the construction course. We'll retrace our steps in a moment, but I just list them. There's the construction course, the access to neighbouring land, and there's the administrator's course, isn't there? Perhaps you could just take us through in a little bit more detail about first of all, the construction course.
Yeah, so the construction course would be for applicants perhaps with less understanding in construction itself and less building pathology knowledge, to get them up to a standard where they wouldn't be uncomfortable and out of place sitting the 2-day course. Whilst the 2-day course is a brilliant course for party wall surveyors, in order to get the most out of the 2-day course, you do need to have a reasonably good understanding of building construction and building pathology and how everything's put together. When we're talking about specific notifiable works and the drawings, and we get into the crux of basements and things like that, and there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's various different types of construction, and what a party wall award does, it dictates the time and the manner of the notifiable work. So whilst a certain type of construction might be proposed, it might not be the best way to do something, or not that we're designers, but it might be that something needs to be undertaken in a different way, and that's why good building construction knowledge is very important in sitting the 2-day course. For the construction course, again, that provides you with that blanket to help you understand the different types of notifiable work, and there's a lot more drawings involved, and a lot more understanding of the different types of notifiable work and the way that things are constructed. So it's a good platform, particularly if you're quite green to construction or you're just coming into it, to attend the construction course before attending the 2-day course.
Does the construction course, you mentioned that it talks about specific scenarios that will happen. How is that particular work, which is engaging the act, how will it affect that particular element of the building, whether it's a foundation or a wall or a separating floor between apartments? Does it actually, or do you rely upon questions evolving out? You set out the scenario where it will happen, but do you then, does the course actually cover the potential problems which may result?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so where you might recommend a certain type of construction, well, not least, it could be beneficial, equally beneficial to the building owner to do it in this way, in a way that it doesn't upset an adjoining owner, for example.
I'm thinking specifically of hit and miss excavations, where the excavations are done in a certain sequence, in order that to avoid a continuous trench being excavated next to a neighbouring property, which could end up in the trench if we're not careful. So are elements like that, you've touched quite rightly on building pathology, it's dealing with potential defects, and does the construction course deal with those potential issues when you, as you say, when you're considering the timing and the manner of the works that we're authorising in this award?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not least another common one would be, you often see it on drawings that come through where, might have a steel column sat in a concrete pad hard up against a Victorian party wall, which has obviously got should normally have a brick corbelling, footing, which it would be intercepting with. So it's ways around that really as well. You mentioned about hit and miss or sequential foundations. Again, really important if it's a shallow foundation, certainly depending on if you're very close to that wall. Not just that as well, you're looking at where the steel beams are going into the wall, and how we might cut pockets into the party wall. We're using hand tools and circular saws for the concrete padstones or steel spreader plates, and why a padstone might be used, or why a steel spreader plate might be used if you're close to a floor structure, for example, and you need the extra space. So these are the sorts of things that the construction course helps you with, which you'd be far the richer for knowing when attending the 2-day course.
And I suppose if they don't know their construction when they sit in on this course, in some ways they're approaching it from a different angle, aren't they? But you've mentioned, you know, considerations of excavations, how they can affect existing structures, how cutting something as physical as a beam into a wall that separates buildings can represent probably potentially one of the biggest risks, isn't it? So they're confronted with that on the course first, and then they can probably go back and look in more details of what's expected of a foundation, what is expected of a load-bearing soil, and the spreading of the weight imposed by this beam, this load-bearing element, into a party wall. So I think it's reassurance, isn't it, in many ways to the participants of these construction courses. If they're not fully versed in construction, it gives them some pointers, doesn't it?
The 2-day course is an awful lot of information. The last thing you want to be doing on the 2-day course is worrying about how something works, when really what we're trying to accomplish is reverting back to the legislation and the Act. So it's actually a really good course, and very beneficial to surveyors that are just starting out.
It supplements, doesn't it?
It does as well. There's a book as well. Alex has got, I'm sure he's spoken about one of his books in a separate podcast. But you know, the books as well are fantastic, and you know, strongly recommend reading Misunderstanding and Guidance before attending the 2-day course.
You told us this morning that a lot, I didn't appreciate this, a lot of the drawings in the 4th edition of Misunderstanding Guidance are actually from the construction course, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
So, you know, again, reading that book before the construction course will give you a good understanding and knowledge of what's coming up. And, you know, whilst you might, you know, have read through it in the book, it's good to also walk through the drawings as well and just provide different analogies and situations. And it also depends on the people in the classroom as well. You might have a few engineers, and they're not necessarily on the construction course, but on the 2-day course. Different disciplines in the construction industry, whether they're architects or trainee engineers or trainee surveyors, and different situations that they may have come across. Have a conversation with them about, you know, how something might work in a bespoke situation that they found themselves in the professional world.
Still carrying on with the supplements to the main course is something that's very close to your heart, Access to the Neighbouring Land Act, which I think is a course that you run personally, isn't it? With the faculty?
Yeah, Access to Neighbouring Land Act's a really good course. The 1992 Access to Neighbouring Land Act. It's the Party Wall Act dovetails with various other different acts of law, you know, Law and Property and Prescription Act, and of course Access to Neighbouring Land Act. And whilst we can obtain access to adjoining lands under the Act for notifiable works, where works are not notifiable, and certainly if they're maintenance, and certainly if the adjoining owner or the neighbouring owners don't want a building owner to get access onto their land to obtain this maintenance work, they can get access through the Access to Neighbouring Land Act. There's very few cases under the Access to Neighbouring Land Act. It's not often used, but it's a good tool for a building owner if they wanted to undertake maintenance works in a safe and reasonable manner, and they, in order to do so, need to obtain access onto the adjoining owner's land.
And I wonder if you could elaborate on that, because the Access to the Neighbouring Land Act is all to do with essential repairs, isn't it? You wouldn't be able to get it for development.
Not for development, no. It's all about maintenance, really. So, and we often see it with Victorian, Georgian properties, or properties all over London, all over the country, really, where, you know, certainly in the modern day with health and safety, you know, as it is now, it's really important to make sure that there are safe systems of work. And not least where you know, in other ways it's absolutely essential to obtain access to carry out other works to their own property, so particularly flank walls that are built on the line of junction or the boundary line. So maintenance is obviously key to maintaining a nice home, and whilst building owners might feel like it's necessary to do that, even if you're not house proud, it's important to carry out certain areas of maintenance. And of course, the Access to Neighbouring Land Act, as I mentioned, is a brilliant tool to get you access onto the neighbour's land, so that you can carry out that work to keeping your house in a good fashion.
That is the most mind-boggling things for the lay people, isn't it? Where we represent them as either the building owner, the person that's actually undertaking the works, whether it's development and or repairs, and the adjoining owner, the ones on the receiving end of the works going on next door. And the fact that if the notifiable works, the works that engage the Act, are in place, then there is a right of access to do these works in pursuance of the Party Wall Act, isn't it? It's got to be related to that. And therefore, by serving this this notice, the building owner, the person undertaking the works, is actually avoiding the possibility of a claim in trespass and or nuisance, aren't they? And that is often the most difficult thing we have in putting over to an adjoining owner. They do have rights of access within limitations to undertake this work. But where it doesn't, where the Act is not engaged, so if they're not excavating within 3 metres, for example, of a neighbouring property, or where they're not cutting into a separating party wall, or if they're not building up to the boundary line, the line of junction, then there is no access flowing from the Act there. And the poor old building owner wants to undertake certain development works, but the Access to Neighbouring Land Act doesn't come to the rescue there, does it?
Yeah, so where the Party Wall Act can supplant common law, so to speak, and you can obtain access under Section 8 because you are looking to carry out notifiable work. I mean, that's fantastic. We can serve an award to that degree, again, dictating that time and manner of the notifiable work. But when it comes down to certain maintenance works that aren't notifiable, unfortunately, the Act can't be invoked because there's no notice to serve, and getting access to that land is imperative to carry out any necessary repairs.
It was interesting you saying that the Access to Neighbouring Land Act, which is dovetailing with the Party Wall Act, it tries to cover essential repairs that aren't covered under the Party Wall Act, and you said there's very few cases around it. So does that mean do you think, in your experience, that the Party Wall Act covers most of the situations, and where neither of these pieces of legislation work, there's an agreement between the parties?
Yeah, I think more the latter. I think, and certainly when it comes to maintenance, most neighbours are happy to allow a building owner, an owner who's desirous and doing the work to their own property, access onto the neighbouring land to carry out that access. I mean, a lot of the time, certainly if it's a blank wall, it's the adjoining owner that has to look at it, I suppose. So it's if it's a prettier wall, I'm sure they're more than happier for it. And I would have said, not just a gentleman's agreement. You have access licences and scaffold licences and hoarding licences as well that can be put into place. But where, for example, an adjoining owner is holding a building owner for ransom, that's where the Access to Neighbouring Land Act can come in and provide them with the means of access, whilst maybe paying a fair and reasonable fee rather than something that's unreasonable.
I know that you and I work very closely on presenting these forums and training courses, and we try not to be too much in the way of dictators, don't we? It's all about engagement. This is the theme behind this series of podcasts, that we're talking about people engaging from so many different ways. And we as surveyors, where the poor old building owner wants to do some development work, can't invoke the Act because the parameters don't exist. The Access to Neighbouring Land Act doesn't deal with development. And we encourage the parties to speak, don't we? Engage with one another. And we try, I know you and I and the other members of our presentation teams try to encourage. It's a people's business as well, this, isn't it? Getting people to engage. And I suppose the neighbours being told that it's in their interest that these works are done as well, because if next door cannot build his wall up against the boundary line as part of the development, they're going to face this eyesore, because the best bricklayer in the world is not going to do a very good job if he's having to build overhand. So he's facing it. Yeah. So, I mean, I know you're very good at it. You're very much a people's person. You engage, and I think probably everyone after why we haven't had the Access to Neighbouring Land Act invoked so often is down to the likes of Daniel in his good work.
No, it's kind of you to say so, Stephen. No, I think it's made a great point. Really, we're almost mediators sometimes, aren't we?
Yes.
Certainly with the courts, now asking for mediation to be undertaken before things are actually put before the judge. It's all the more important, certainly at the moment, to mediate between the parties as well. So, mediation is perhaps the flavour of the year, I suppose, in terms of how things are going before getting put in front of a judge. I know that judges certainly are encouraging that, aren't they? Before they to keep the costs down more than anything else as well, which again is an admirable thing. But no, that's right. We also there's other courses as well that we do, as the admin course, which is again a really useful course to do, which we go through with notices, about the notices and the types of notices and how to make the notices valid. The last thing you want to do is to almost or try and invoke the Act by means of serving a notice, supplanting common law, as we mentioned already, but getting that wrong. If you get that wrong, you might as well have not served the notice at all, and everything you do after that, well, it wouldn't be valid under the Act. Because, well, lo and behold, the common law wouldn't have been supplanted because the notice wasn't valid and the notice wasn't served correctly. So it's, it helps, making the note, letters of appointment as well, making sure the appointment letters are correct and the correct wording with those appointment letters, making sure your filing's impeccable, because you mentioned it yourself, don't we, Stephen, when we're doing the courses, when we're writing an award, it's almost to write the award almost for the judge, to give them a good picture of what's going on. And if we're writing an award almost as if it's in front of a judge, then and then it becomes in front of a judge, and our paperwork's not in order. We all have to create bundles, don't we? When we go to court, whether it is for an appeal or of an award, or whether it's for recovery of fees, it's so important for our paperwork to be correct and on point, and not least to make sure that we're serving the correct notices with the correct notice periods, and making sure that letters of appointment are absolutely correct with the correct wording, and making sure we're selecting a third surveyor to form that tribunal in the event that there's two surveyors involved, and to make sure that we move things forward correctly.
I've often heard it described that it's one of the most highest paid admin jobs in the world, isn't it, being a party wall surveyor? And I know some surveyors do obviously delegate administration duties to assistants and to admin staff. Do you have any problems with that? And is it something that's spoken about on the admin course?
When you're acting as a party wall surveyor, once the dispute arises, you're under statute, so essentially it should be the individual doing the work. I do appreciate that notices are served and maybe drafted by an administrative team or junior surveyors and whatever, but lo and behold, at the end of the day, it should be the surveyor who's looking to take on the job or the appointment in the event of dispute that should be serving the notices. After all, if you're going to sign a notice on behalf of a building owner, who's actually got that instruction? Is it the junior? Is it the receptionist? Is it, the admin team? No, normally not. It's normally the surveyor. So it's the surveyor that would have the written authority to serve a notice. So it's the surveyor that needs to serve the notice in order for it to be valid. Whilst it might be being drafted by others, well, fine. As long as it's checked and overlooked and responsibility is taken and it's also served by the surveyor, I don't see any problem at all.
And I suppose really to finish off with now then, with all this depth of experience you've had in so many sectors and disciplines across the faculty, focusing now on your main focus, which is the training courses and the forums, where do you see those going in the future? You personally, where would you like to see them moving towards?
So the courses are endless. There's an awful lot that we offer at the faculty, which is fantastic, particularly with boundaries as well. It really does dovetail in nicely with being a party wall surveyor. You probably, as a party wall surveyor, come across more boundary disputes than anyone else, because they can arise when notifiable works are being proposed. And whilst Alex would have maybe spoken about a book on a separate podcast on boundary disputes, another fantastic book to read before maybe attending the boundary disputes course or during or after. The boundary disputes course is a brilliant course to attend as well, not least because it's another feather in your hat and another discipline that you can get out of being a party wall surveyor, so to speak.
So that's an example of where something's evolved out of what the faculty are doing, the need to educate, the need to produce a boundary dispute course. Do you feel there's a possibility of separate podcasts like this on specific subjects for courses rather than a complete generic course, maybe under one heading?
Yeah, there's certainly I think there'd certainly be a thirst for it. Whilst we do produce the course, there can be also snippets of information or specific, maybe case study podcasts that could be used and utilised and could be an interesting view for members and applicants or the general public. So no, that could be a good way to go. But supply and demand, Stephen. If there's a need for it and there's a course to be produced, then lo and behold, the faculty will produce one.
And I know you're heavily involved, as am I, and we've got the main guru coming on this in the next episode of this series, Nick Moulton, who's doing the guidance notes, isn't he? And we recognise that, and Nick will explain it better than I will, the need for guidance notes. And they are then flowing from those guidance notes are a whole set of forums. And you've already staged 2 this year, haven't you, on the first set? And I suspect that that's going to be quite fruitful in terms of the number of future forums, isn't it? And have you got a particular favourite subject you would like to have a specific forum on? And
for me personally, I love the law. So I really like sort of the case law updates and new cases coming through, which really then does almost train the mind, really. And I do like a bit of case law that upsets the apple cart. So I enjoy that sort of thing as well. And you mentioned about the guidance notes, again, a fantastic tool for surveyors to just again to bounce an opinion off themselves without having to pick up the phone. Just to go, I wonder what the guidance note says on security for expenses, or or anything really. I mean, the beauty of the guidance notes is that they could be endless. Once something else comes up, we can write a guidance note on it. Whether it's thickening of a party fence wall, and whether you're allowed to to do that on someone else's land without without their written consent. There's a lot of grey area in the Act. And it's just quite nice to put an opinion across to try and assist people with maybe removing the grey.
Well, thanks, Daniel. I think from evolving out of this talk today has been, first of all, it's all about engagement, and I'll keep saying that word until the cows come home. It's all about engagement from so many different people, professionals, lay people, and we respond. The faculty responds to these requests for further information. The guidance notes is just one example, but the case law that Daniel refers to, we're very privileged to have many retired judges, existing judges and lawyers giving us advice there. But it is all down to the membership and also to the public to engage with us, and we will do our utmost to respond. But I hope you found this particular podcast in this 6-part series very interesting, and I'd like to thank you once again, Daniel, for your time today.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.